Like, what is it? Is it peanut butter? Is it chocolate? No, it's a roux. Hi, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Marta, and I am the chef and author of Sense and Edibility, a site where I teach you everything I know about cooking, baking, and cocktail making. And today's recipe video is about how to make a roux, spelled R-O-U-X, roux. It's French. Now, this is a chocolate roux. It is very, very dark. It smells nutty. It smells a lot like toasted pecans. It is made of two simple ingredients, but it takes a good amount of effort to get it to this point. Before we get started on this video, I would love it if you would subscribe to my channel and become a part of my community. I would also encourage you to sign up for the notifications so that every time I post a new video, you can be notified. So let me show you how I make my roux. Heat a 10 or 12 inch skillet over medium heat. And to the skillet, you want to add lard. I'm using lard, but you can use vegetable oil, butter. You could use shortening, though shortening I don't recommend because flavor-wise it doesn't do anything. Same with vegetable oil. With butter, you're going to have to be careful because butter will burn easier, but I'll talk about that later. To the melted lard in the pan, add all-purpose flour. What you want to do is stir the flour into the melted lard, breaking up the large clumps of flour until the mixture is completely smooth. This is all you need to make a roux, fat and flour. What you're doing is gradually toasting the starches in the flour, and you're creating a paste between the flour and the fat. This later is going to be used to thicken whatever you add it to. Now you'll notice that the flour started very blonde, or the roux started very blonde in color. It was almost yellow. The longer you cook your roux, the darker in color it will be, the more nutty it will taste once it's finished. What I do is I always use this wooden spoon to make my roux because the color of the spoon is the color that I want my final roux to be. For me, it's just an easy way to tell, when I need to stop cooking my roux. One thing you want to pay attention to when it comes to roux is that you want to stir it continuously. Now, if you notice some of your roux is accumulating on the sides of the pan, you want to use a rubber spatula to scrape down the sides because you don't want that to sit over there and start to burn, because you're going to end up stirring that back into the roux and creating an acrid flavor in your roux. Continuously stir the roux to keep it from burning on the bottom of the pan. You could let it sit for 30 seconds and cook without stirring, but you don't want to go longer than 30 seconds because that's a good way to go from chocolate roux to burnt roux, and that's not fun. After about 45 minutes to an hour, your roux is going to be a deep brown color. Go ahead and turn the stove off, and you want to allow the roux to cool off of the stove or off of any heat source. Pour it into a separate container. You don't want it to stay in the pan because the pan is still hot and it's going to continue heating the roux and toasting it and making it darker. Just scrape it into another bowl and stir it often to kind of incorporate the liquid fat into the flour mixture. As it cools, it's going to become a thick paste, much like melted chocolate. You can use it now, or you can cover and store it in the refrigerator until you're ready. Now, if you are not a fan of standing over a stove and stirring and stirring and stirring, let me show you how I make a microwave roux. Okay, here's a disclaimer. You're still gonna have to stir, but you don't have to do it over a stove. Melt the lard in the microwave for 30 to 45 seconds, and then pour the melted lard into the all-purpose flour in a wide, shallow dish. You want this to be microwave safe because this roux is gonna get really hot. Press out any clumps of flour and then microwave this mixture for 1 minute on high heat. Bring it out of the microwave and give it a good stir, and then smooth out the surface of the roux. Then what you want to do is return it to the microwave for another minute. Each time you microwave this roux, it's going to get darker and darker, especially in the center. That's just the way microwaves work, right? They cook from the center out. So what you want to do when you take it out of the microwave is press out the center part, mix the center out towards the sides of the roux, and then stir it all together. That way you create a nice even mixture. After about 5 minutes, you're going to decrease the cooking time in the microwave to 30-second bursts. If you cook it for longer than 30 seconds at a time, it's going to burn in the center. Towards the end of the cooking time, you're going to notice that the center is getting really dark. Just press it and stir it out towards the outer edges and bring it back in. You're going to cook it for about another 15 to 18 minutes in the microwave until it gets very dark. It's going to smell very nutty too. So just make sure you're only cooking in 30-second bursts. Once you're finished with the roux, you can transfer it to a storage container and keep it in the fridge for about a week until you're ready to use it. Just remember that the fat is going to solidify, so it's going to get hard, but all you need to do is microwave it for 30 seconds to make it stirrable again. So as you can see, making a roux is very simple. It requires 2 ingredients, a spoon or a rubber spatula, and a pan. That's all you need to make a roux. It takes time and it takes patience to make a roux that is as dark as this chocolate roux is. Let me answer some frequently asked questions that I get about roux. Lard is amazing. It tastes great. It still remains pliable once it's chilled or it's cooled down, and it has a higher smoke point than butter does. So that is why I prefer to use lard to make my roux. Now, for my friends who abstain from pork, you may be thinking, well, I can't make a roux because I don't eat lard. But modern day advances are amazing because now there's duck lard, there's chicken lard, there's even vegetable lard, which is basically vegetable shortening, but without all the emulsifiers and preservatives and stuff. So you are in luck. You can still make this roux with lard. You just use one that suits your dietary needs. All roux are made up of the same 2 ingredients. That is a fat and a flour. Well, and flour, not a flour. All-purpose flour is what you use to make your roux, but the fat can be interchangeable. You can make your roux with vegetable oil or canola oil or peanut oil, or you can make it with a lard like I do, or you can make it with butter. I don't like using butter to make any of my roux because butter, when it's chilled, is rock hard. And that means that whatever I added my roux to thicken it is also going to be much harder than normal when it's chilled. Vegetable oil, on the other hand, doesn't offer anything in the way of flavor. Anytime I can add flavor to anything that I'm making, I'm going to do it. Lard for me is the best option whenever I'm making my roux. It has a high smoke point, lard does, which butter doesn't. And the smoke point just means that it is the temperature at which butter or your fat will start to smoke. So if you're looking at butter, it has a much lower smoke point than something like vegetable oil or lard does, which also means that your roux is going to start smoking a lot sooner. Butter does have a great flavor, but it tends to, again, get firm in the refrigerator or once it's chilled. So I'm not a fan of butter-based roux. Vegetable oil, I kind of, I'm not a fan of vegetable oil-based roux, just because, I mean, oils don't really give much flavor. So, you can use it. It would be the same amount, but I don't know. I just don't. Each roux has a different flavor. A blonde roux that is cooked for a very short period of time has virtually no flavor. It doesn't really taste like anything. That's why it's great to add it to things like a milk sauce, a bechamel, or a Mornay sauce, because it doesn't overpower the flavors that you want in that sauce. The longer you cook your roux, the more toasted the starches and the flour are going to get. So you're going to have nuttier flavors the darker you go with your roux. So if you're settling on a mid-range for that brown roux, you're gonna have slight mild nuttiness in your roux. And therefore you're gonna have that same nuttiness in whatever you add your roux to. If you go the full Monty and go to a chocolate roux or a very dark brown roux, you're going to have notes of smokiness and extreme nuttiness. So it's going to taste, like I said, much like toasted pecans. And what else do I smell? Yeah, smokiness, nuttiness. Imagine roasting chestnuts over an open fire. That's what's in there. So the longer you cook your roux, the darker your roux is, the more flavor you're going to get from the roux. You're welcome. The roux that you cook will determine what you use it in. So if you make a blonde roux or a very light roux, which is one that is cooked the least amount, then you would use that in sauces like bechamels or Mornay sauce, which is a cheese sauce. Anything that is going to be light in color, that's what you want to use your blonde roux in. For brown roux, you would use that in sauces like Espanol sauce, which is a tomato-based brown sauce. You would use it in brown gravy, so beef gravy or turkey gravy. Anything that you want a little bit of color to, that's what you would add a brown, that's what you would add a brown roux to. Now this chocolate roux is the darkest, yeah, it's dark. You would add this to a gumbo. If you use roux for your etouffees or your, I don't know. You can even use this in a sauce or a stew that you just want even more color and more flavor in. So those are the different applications for the roux based on how long you cook them and the color that you cook them to. You must cook your flour. If you're going for a light blonde roux or, a blonde roux, you have to cook your flour for at least 1 minute. If you don't, your roux is going to have raw flour taste. It's not going to taste good. So you have to take your time and make sure that you cook it for a full minute once you add the flour to the fat in the pan. Yes, you can also make this roux in the oven. That will take a little bit more time. You're going to cook it at 400 degrees in the oven. You're going to remove it from the oven and stir it like you were doing, like you saw me do, like I was doing on each cooking process. Yeah, you just got to stir it. So I would pull it out every 5 minutes, give it a stir, return it to the oven. I don't like making roux in the oven. I barely like making roux in the microwave. If I have a hankering for something like gumbo that requires a very dark roux, I will, and like I didn't plan ahead, I will totally make my roux in the microwave, but I hate doing it in the microwave. Just because it's too much like pushing the button to open the door and closing it and doing all that stuff, it irritates me. Standing over the stove is not that fun, but at least all I have to do is stand over the stove. I don't have to move and shift and do all that stuff. I'm not a huge fan of making roux in the microwave or the oven just because it's too many extra steps for me. But again, if you're not into standing over the stove or if you are short on time, both of those options work well. Now, if you do your roux in the oven, it's probably going to take about the same amount of time that it would take over the stove. So you're not really saving any time there. So to use your roux, you need to add it to liquid that is boiling or is going to boil, because that's what cooks those starches in the flour and helps to thicken up whatever you're adding it to. And anytime I'm using a roux, I am always mixing it in to a paste almost. The only exception is when I'm making gumbo and I add the roux to the gumbo. I just toss it in and I just whisk right in the center of the pot. When you're making something like a bechamel, which is a milk sauce, a bechamel is literally a milk sauce. It is milk that is thickened with a blonde roux until the point where it, coats the back of a spoon. What you want to do is have your roux ready and then add warm milk to the pan and stir it, whisk it in well until it's nice and smooth. The reason why you want to add your milk gradually or your liquids gradually to your roux is because you want to avoid the roux clumping up. Adding your liquid to the roux gradually is what will keep it nice and smooth, and then you'll move into a thickened sauce. Cook your roux after you've added your roux to whatever you want to thicken. Cook it for at least 5 minutes after you add it. And it doesn't have to be at a rapid boil either. A roux is going to do what it does. It's going to thicken the liquid just because that's what it's meant to do. Don't overcook it because you can break a sauce. But just cook it until it's as thick as you need it. And yeah. You can store your roux in a covered container in the fridge for a week. After that, I would kind of discard it because the flour still is flour and it tends to get rancid the longer it sits. And that will be nasty if you add it to anything. I have frozen roux in the past. It may be something psychological, but I don't think that a roux that was frozen thickens the same as a roux that was made fresh, or even a roux that was stored in the refrigerator. So if you choose to freeze your roux, freeze it in a covered container for 2 months, and then you can use it, you can thaw it out and use it as normal. I'll be honest, I have never made a roux with anything other than all-purpose flour. I feel like the level of protein in all-purpose flour is perfect for making a roux. I would like to think that it will take less time to get to a darker roux with wheat flour because it's not bleached. That being said, if you want to try it with wheat flour, use the same amount, but you might have to only cook it for 40 minutes or 50 minutes as opposed to an hour. If you do it with wheat flour, let me know. I have also never made my roux with gluten-free flour or one-to-one flour. If you think about the science behind a roux, all you're doing is creating a paste of flour and fat. So I don't see why a one-to-one flour wouldn't work for this recipe. All you're taking out is the gluten and gliadin that creates gluten, which is what makes it a gluten-free flour. So I think it will work. Yeah. Try it and let me know. Yeah, I think so. A roux is the easiest thing you will ever make in your life, I promise. So stay tuned because you're going to be able to see how I'm using this chocolate roux and in what recipe. And I guarantee you, you want this recipe because it is fire. Yeah, so look for that on my channel shortly. It should be popping up within a week after I post this one, this roux recipe. And you can find the full, actually you won't find the full recipe for this. Look for this recipe or how to make a roux on my gumbo recipe. I can't really wink. On my site. But it's so easy. Half a cup of lard to a cup of flour. That's the recipe. So I will link the recipe for the gumbo down below. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial on how to make a roux. If you did, don't forget to like this video. Give me a thumbs up, please, because it makes me feel good about myself. And leave me a comment in the comment section below to let me know how you like to make your roux. Do you make it on the stovetop, in the oven, or in the microwave, or some other new fandangled technique that I have never heard of? Let me know down in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel before you click out. And in the meantime, enjoy your roux. Bye. Don't forget to watch for the outtakes. You know those are always funny. Bye. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Somebody's calling. Hello? 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 I don't know who that was. Yeah, so I think that's it.